The Islamic Ottoman scholar Al-Kawthari, Muhammad Zahid Al-Kawthari, writes, "The creed of Islam is one, according to the pious predecessors and the latter ones. It has not changed or altered. Rather, what has been revived or what has been renewed is the method of defending it from the new arguments of its opponents. As such, it is a constantly developing institution, not in relation to the fundamentals of the faith, but rather in relation to the hermeneutic tools used to defend religious beliefs." A primary example of this would in fact be the likes of the great Ash'ari scholar Al-Ghazali, who synthesized rational theology with many aspects of Avicennian philosophy. Interestingly enough, he was criticized in his time for using and explaining the arguments of his opponents and the techniques of his opponents, to which he responded that if he did not clarify first the beliefs of his opponents and didn't steelman them and then responded and refuted them, then his arguments wouldn't be academically or intellectually sound, and that would give his opponents an excuse to dismiss his arguments as having not understood their theology properly. We can see this increasing emphasis on logic and reason in the following statement of Al-Ghazali: "The one who doesn't know the science of logic, meaning mantiq, there is no trust of his knowledge." Furthermore, in his book Deliverance from Error, Al-Ghazali emphasizes the importance of first principles from philosophy. He says that for first principles aren't sought since they are present and to hand, and if what is present is sought for, it becomes hidden and lost. Hence, philosophical first principles were an important part of Al-Ghazali's thought to defend Islamic theology based off of rational argumentation. Interestingly, even Ibn Taymiyyah, a scholar whose works and whose ideas are often presented as anti-rationalist, used philosophy quite extensively in his works. In particular, he was influenced by Abu al-Barakat al-Baghdadi, the famous Baghdadian scientist and philosopher. He even went as far as to call him an imam, a leader in philosophy. For more information on this, see A. Mustafa's 2024 work, Abu al-Barakat al-Baghdadi wa as-Salafiyya ibn Taymiyyah an-Muzaja. In relation to the Maturidi school, in particular, we can see many important developments post 1260, post the sacking of Baghdad, whereby Orientalists traditionally present Muslim civilization as having gone into intellectual stagnation. However, that is far from the case, as the center of Muslim learning post 1260, post the sacking of Baghdad, shifted from Arab lands to Persian and Turkic lands. In the Indian subcontinent, for example, we can see the rich traditions of the Mughal Empire and its scholarship. We can also see theological developments in more modern times in relation to the Barelvi Deobandi schism within the Maturidi Hanafi Jewish schools. The Ottomans in particular were great standard bearers of the Hanafi Maturidi Jewish schools. Many important theological discussions such as free will and predestination occurred. In particular, the concept of al-irada al-juz'iyya, particular will, was developed in this time. There were even many critiques amongst Maturidi circles for what they viewed as the Ash'ari school's soft jabr, meaning soft form of determinism, and this showed inner Sunni polemics, and that the Sunni tradition was constantly engaging within itself alongside other traditions in order to develop itself. Quite ironically, the Ash'ari and Maturidi schools have simultaneously been accused of intellectual stagnation and decadence due to extreme conservatism by Orientalists, whilst also having been accused of being too rational and of being semi-Mu'tazilites by Salafis and some Hanbali scholars. In relation to modernity in the modern day, some like Dr. Muhammad Iqbal called for a jadid, meaning a new form of rational theology. However, others such as the Deobandi scholar Ashraf Ali Tanvi, who passed away in the year 1943, mentioned that the principles of theology need not be changed for modernity, but rather the application of classical principles needs to be changed in order to be relevant to modernity. For example, take the following texts from the classical theological primer of the Maturidi school, Aqaid al-Nasafi, حقائق الأشياء ثابتة, meaning the realities of things are established. This can be applied to modern day skepticism, even though it was traditionally applied to the sophists. This can also be corroborated by other principles in the Islamic scholarly tradition. For example, the following legal maxim, اليقين لا يزول بالشك, that certainty is not undone by doubt. Other examples of traditional Islamic theology being applied in a modern context would be the Kalam cosmological argument. William Lane Craig, a famous Christian philosopher, has used this argument quite frequently, and this argument has its basis within Islamic theology, for example by the likes of Al-Ghazali. Furthermore, the reliability of authentic testimonial knowledge and its various proofs can be used against certain Enlightenment philosophers such as David Hume, who would reject miracles being reported on the basis of testimony. At the same time, whilst maintaining these classical theological principles, one will have to inevitably synthesize certain elements of modernity, post-modernity, and Enlightenment and post-Enlightenment thought with rational Islamic classical theology. This can be seen as a slightly modernist approach. And as Dr. Mahathir, the former president of Malaysia, said, only when Islam is interpreted so as to be relevant in a world which is different from what it was 1,400 years ago can Islam be regarded as a religion for all ages. Hence, elements of modernity and of the various thoughts that have arisen in modernity has to be synthesized with classical Islamic theology in order to give a theological and hermeneutic tool by which Muslims can rationally defend themselves from the arguments of modernists in modern times. Thus, the Islamic faith and furthermore Islamic theology isn't simply a stagnant reality, it's a constantly developing one, whereby tools are developed and crafted and knowledge is constantly sought and adapted in order to defend traditional Islamic beliefs. Thanks for watching. Peace.